Welcome to the Grateful Living podcast. Join us for this week's episode. Hi, beautiful souls. Welcome back to the Grateful Living podcast. So today's episode is one I think I needed to hear myself, because over the past few months, I've noticed something changing in the way that I approach life, my spirituality, and even the decisions that I make. I've realized that so much of my life used to be spent asking, when is it going to happen to me? How is it going to happen for me? When am I going to meet the right person? When will my business grow? When will I finally feel ready? And if I'm honest, I wasn't always looking for an answer. I was looking for certainty. I wanted to know that everything was going to work out before I took that next step. I wanted reassurance that I wasn't making a mistake. I wanted someone or something to tell me that I was on the right path. And I don't think I'm alone in that. As human beings, uncertainty is uncomfortable. We like plans, we like guarantees, we like knowing what's around the corner. But life rarely gives us that. Instead, it asks us to trust, and I think that's one of the hardest things we'll ever do, because trusting isn't passive. Trusting often means making a decision without knowing exactly how it's all going to unfold. It means saying yes before you have all of the answers. It means taking the next step without seeing the whole staircase. And that's what I want to talk about today. Not because I have all the answers, but because I've noticed a shift in myself that I think has been incredibly freeing. I've stopped trying to control every outcome. I've stopped needing to know exactly when everything's going to happen. And in doing that, I've actually found a lot more peace. So today, I want to talk about why I think so many of us spend our lives looking for certainty, why we become attached to signs, and why learning to trust yourself might be one of the most powerful spiritual practices of all. So what actually changed for me? Well, if you followed me for a while, you'll probably know that I used to share a lot more oracle cards and angel cards, and I still absolutely believe that they can be beautiful tools, and they can encourage reflection, offer a different perspective, and sometimes help us slow down enough to hear what we already know deep down. And I do still use them with clients when it feels appropriate, and there are moments where I'll use them personally too. So this isn't me saying they're good or bad. It's more about the relationship we have with them, because I realized there was a period of my life where I wasn't just using them for guidance, I was using them for reassurance. I'd ask a question, pull a card, and then a few hours later, I'd ask the same question in a slightly different way, or be waiting for another sign, another angel number, another confirmation that I was doing the right thing. And when I really reflected on that, I realized something. It wasn't bringing me peace. It was feeding my need for certainty and clarity. I wanted to know when something was going to happen. I wanted to know how it was going to happen. I wanted proof that everything I hoped for was definitely on its way. And the interesting thing is, the more attached I became to knowing when and how, the more anxious I felt. Because my attention wasn't on living life. It was on constantly checking if I was getting closer to the outcome. And I think that's something we can fall into, whether it's through spirituality or not. Maybe for you it isn't angel numbers. Maybe it's Googling the same question over and over again. Maybe it's asking every friend for their opinion before making a decision. Or maybe it's watching another YouTube video, hoping someone will finally tell you exactly what to do. On the surface, it looks like we're searching for answers, but underneath that, I think we're often searching for certainty. And certainty is something life can never fully give us. That's when I realised something that honestly changed the way I look at spirituality. I don't think signs are there to tell us what to do. I think they're there to remind us to stay awake, to stay present, to notice, to reflect. But they're not there to replace our own inner wisdom. Because if every decision depended on another sign, another card, or another confirmation, we slowly stop trusting the voice that's already inside us. And for me, I don't think that's the purpose of a spiritual journey. I think the purpose is to become more connected to yourself, not less. I think the goal is to reach a place where you can pause, listen to your intuition, and make a decision. Not because you have a guarantee it will work out, but because you trust yourself enough to navigate whatever comes next. And that's a very different kind of peace. So why do we do this? Why do we keep looking for signs instead of making decisions? I actually don't think it's because we're weak, and I don't think it's because we lack faith. I think it's because making a decision means accepting uncertainty. The moment you make a decision, you're also accepting the fact you can't know exactly what's going to happen next. And for our brains, that's uncomfortable. Our brains are constantly trying to keep us safe, not necessarily happy or fulfilled, safe. Which means if there's any uncertainty, our brain starts asking questions. But what if it doesn't happen? What if it's the wrong choice? What if I regret it? What if everyone thinks I've made a mistake? Sounds familiar, right? Because I know I've had those thoughts. And when we're uncomfortable with uncertainty, we naturally start looking outside ourselves. For some people, it's signs from the universe. For other people, it's asking 5 different friends what they should do. It's reading every article on Google or listening to another podcast or buying another course until we feel 100% ready. It's all the same thing. We're hoping that somewhere, someone will give us the answers that removes the risk. But here's the problem. No one can do that because every decision carries some uncertainty. Even the right decision. You can choose the relationship you've always wanted and there'll still be challenges. You can start the business that you've dreamed about for years and there'll still be difficult days. You can leave the job that makes you unhappy and there'll still be moments where you question yourself. There isn't a decision that comes with a guarantee. And I actually think that's where freedom begins. Because if you stop waiting for certainty, you start living. One of the biggest mindset shifts I've had is this. Instead of asking, how do I know if this is the right decision? I've started asking myself, can I trust myself to handle whatever happens after I make this decision? Notice how different those questions are. The first one is about controlling the future. The second one is about trusting yourself. And that's something you can actually build. You build it every time you make a decision, every time you keep a promise to yourself, every time you back yourself, even when you're scared, every time you realise that actually, even when life didn't go to plan before, you survived. And in fact, not only did you survive, you grew. When I look back at my own life, some of the decisions I was most terrified of ended up teaching me the biggest lessons. Not because they were easy, but because they showed me that I was more capable than I believed. And maybe that's what confidence really is. Maybe confidence isn't knowing everything will work out. Maybe confidence is knowing that whatever happens, you'll find a way through it. I think that's the kind of confidence we're all really searching for. Not confidence in the future, but confidence in ourselves. And once you start building that, you don't need quite as many signs because you're no longer asking, please tell me what to do. You're asking what feels most aligned with the person I'm becoming. I think that's much more of an empowering place to live. So this brings us to one of the questions I get asked all the time. How do I know if it's my intuition or if it's just fear? And honestly, I don't think there's always a perfect answer. I wish I could sit here and tell you there's a formula, that intuition always sounds one way and fear always sounds another. But in reality, it isn't always that simple. Sometimes they can feel very similar, especially if you've been through difficult experiences. And, especially if you've been hurt before, if your nervous system has learnt that the world isn't always predictable, sometimes fear can disguise itself as intuition. And sometimes intuition asks us to do things that feel scary. So how do we begin to tell the difference? For me, one of the biggest clues is this. Fear wants certainty before it will let you move. Intuition asks you to take the step, even if you can't see the whole path. Fear says, wait until you know for sure. Intuition says, you know enough to begin. Fear keeps you going round in circles. It asks the same questions over and over again. It looks for another option, another sign, another guarantee. Intuition is different. It doesn't always shout. In fact, I think intuition is often incredibly quiet. It's that feeling that keeps gently coming back. even after you've talked yourself out of it 10 times. It's the opportunity you keep thinking about. It's the conversation you know you need to have. It's the boundary you know you need to set. It's the dream that never quite leaves you alone. You can ignore it for weeks, months, or even years, but somehow it keeps finding its way back. And I think that's because intuition isn't trying to control you. It's simply inviting you to pay attention. Now, that doesn't mean intuition is always comfortable. Sometimes your intuition asks you to do the very thing that scares you. Leave the job, start the business, apply for the job, say no, say yes, be seen, open your heart. Those things can feel terrifying. But if you sit with them for long enough, there's often a quiet knowing underneath the fear. Not certainty, just knowing. And I've learned that there's an important difference between not knowing what will happen and knowing what feels aligned. Because we can never know exactly how life is going to unfold. None of us can. But we can become better at recognizing what aligns with our values, the person we're becoming, and the life that we want to create. And I think that's why self-trust is so important, because the more you trust yourself, the less pressure you put on every single decision being perfect. You stop asking, what if this is the wrong choice? And you start asking, if this doesn't work out, do I trust myself to learn, adapt, and keep moving forward? That question has honestly changed so much for me because it takes the pressure off. It reminds me that there isn't one perfect path that I have to somehow discover. There are just choices, and with every choice, there's an opportunity to learn more about yourself. I think we spend so much of our lives worrying about making the wrong decision, when maybe the bigger risk is never making one at all. Because every day we spend waiting for certainty is another day we don't fully step into our own lives. And I think that's what I've been learning over the last year. Not that I need less faith, but faith sometimes looks different to what I thought it did. For a long time, I thought faith meant waiting for the sign, waiting for confirmation, waiting till everything made sense. But now I think faith is having the courage to take the next step, even when you don't have every answer. And that's a very different way of living. As I said earlier, if you followed me for a while, you'll know that I used to share a lot more oracle cards and angel cards. That's actually how the Grateful Living started. They're still tools that I value, and they're still something I use with clients when it feels appropriate. This isn't me saying I've stopped believing in them. It's actually quite the opposite. I've just stopped depending on them because I noticed something about myself. I kept asking the same question over and over again, and I wasn't looking for guidance anymore. I was looking for an answer that matched the one I wanted to hear, or I was hoping someone or something would remove the uncertainty for me. And that's when I realized I wasn't really practicing trust. I was practicing control. I wanted to know when it would happen, how it would happen, what the outcome would be. And the funny thing is, I think the tighter we hold on to those questions, the harder it becomes to actually enjoy the life we're living today. Because we're always somewhere else. We're always waiting for the next chapter. We're always believing that once that thing happens, then we'll finally relax and we'll finally be happy and we'll finally trust. But what if trust isn't something we arrive at? What if it's something we practice, every single day? Every time we make a decision without having all the answers, or every time we choose courage over certainty, or every time we stop outsourcing our power and start listening to the quiet voice that's already within us. I genuinely believe that our intuition grows stronger the more we trust it. Not because it suddenly becomes louder, but because we become more familiar with it. We stop questioning every feeling. We stop analysing every decision. We stop needing to prove we're on the right path before we're willing to walk it. And that has been one of the biggest gifts of my own journey. Not becoming someone who knows all the answers, but becoming someone who's okay with not knowing everything. Because life has shown me time and time again that some of the best things I've ever experienced were completely unexpected. I couldn't have planned them, I couldn't have predicted them. And if I'd spent my whole life waiting until I felt 100% certain, I probably would have missed so many of them. So maybe instead of asking, universe, give me a sign, we ask ourselves, what decision would I make if I truly trusted myself? I think that's a much more powerful question, because whether you're spiritual or not, whether you believe in signs or synchronicities or neither, at some point every single one of us has had to make a decision. No one else can do that part for us. And maybe that's the lesson. maybe spirituality isn't about finding someone or something to tell us what to do. Maybe it's about becoming the kind of person who can hear their own inner wisdom more clearly. And if that's true, then perhaps the greatest sign you've ever been waiting for isn't outside you at all. It's the quiet confidence that's been growing within you this whole time. So thank you so much for listening to this episode. If this episode resonated, I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can come over on Instagram and send me a little message, because these are the conversations that I love to have, and I'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences. So until next time, take good care. Thank you for listening to today's episode. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram at _grateful_living.